Hello, Taylor Elwood here, and welcome to the Quest for the Sacred Masculine podcast channel. So, today I thought I would talk about how to handle criticism because people, not just men, but men, women, and other gendered people will experience criticism at some point in their lives, and it's a normal experience. But a lot of times, people have thin skin around this kind of experience. They get upset, and I think it's really important to learn how to handle criticism because there's going to be the reality that sometimes you're going to have someone criticize you for something. And you can either take it personally and get upset because they've decided to criticize you and critique you for something that you're doing, or you can choose to take a deep breath, pause, and really listen to them and hear what they're saying. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that you should put up with verbal abuse, and there is a difference between verbal abuse and criticism, and we'll cover that in a moment. Before we do that, if you're new to this channel, go ahead and click subscribe and click the like button or drop a comment below. I'd love to hear from you guys what your thoughts are about this video and what I'm sharing here. So, what's the difference between verbal abuse and criticism? Verbal abuse is where somebody is being intentionally mean to you. Maybe they're doing it in the form of a sarcastic comment, like, "Am I going? Are you going to mow the lawn, or am I going to have to go do it, or am I, or something along those lines?" Or maybe it comes in the form of gaslighting, where the person starts to gaslight you and makes you doubt yourself. Any of these any of these forms of verbal criticism can occur when someone's deliberately insulting and someone attacks you and tries to manipulate you, and is cruel to you. That is verbal criticism, and it's not a healthy response to a situation. Criticism, that good criticism, criticism that is helpful to you, does not have to be harsh. And I find it's interesting that people think that criticism has to be harsh. It doesn't have to be harsh. Criticism isn't about beating somebody down or pointing out everything that's wrong. Criticism ought to be about, "Hey, I've noticed something, and here's something else you can do." Or, "I noticed you did this, and here's a way you could improve on it." As you can see, that doesn't have to be harsh and critical. And I think a lot of times people make the mistake and think that harsh criticism is or the criticism has to be harsh. And I disagree with that. There are ways to be critical about something without having to be critical about the person. We should never make it about the person. And we don't want it to be about ourselves, because when we make it about the person, or we make it about ourselves, we're actually taking away from what the criticism is intended to do, which is to help the person do something different or to help us become better at something. And I think that's a very important point. And yet at the same time, somebody can say something along the lines of, "Hey, if you did X and Y, this you would get a better result," and we can still take it as a personal criticism. When you have that kind of experience, my recommendation is to take a deep breath, pay close attention to what you're feeling, and ask yourself, is this person saying this about? Am I responding to this person, or am I responding to a trigger? For example, I had an experience the other night where my girlfriend made the comment that I was so dramatic. Um, and I definitely had a response to it. I mean, it was a comment about me, so that wasn't necessarily helpful. But it was but what it really was is it was a response to somebody else who used to say that all the time, and that for me had become a gaslighting term. Now, my girlfriend did not mean it that way. I was being really serious and intense and passionate in the moment, and so she spoke to her experience in the moment, and she clarified that. But I still had to step away, and I did feel angry for a moment. But I took a deep breath and I asked myself, "Am I responding to this person, or am I responding to something else?" And I realized I was responding to something else, so I chose to let it go. I did tell my girlfriend what it was, why I was having the response I was having, but I made it clear that it wasn't because of her. And she apologized and said, "I won't say that again." So I mean, that was a good an example of how to diffuse that situation. But what if she had said something to me, like another time she said to me, the way you're cleaning dishes is really driving me nuts. Now, granted, could have been said in a different way. Could have been said, hey, the way you clean, I have suggestions for how you can improve the way you clean dishes. That would have probably been a little more helpful for me. But what I did is in that moment, I said, okay, tell me more. Tell me, I got curious about it. So when I get criticism, I get curious. I was like, tell me more. What could I be doing differently? And not in a challenging way, but in a way of like, I really genuinely want to know more. And so she said, well, one thing, something that you could do is you could make sure that you could make sure that you run the water long enough until it gets really hot and that you do it in the sink. Okay, so I tried that, and I noticed an improvement, and so did she, and she commented on that, and she's like, I noticed that you did this, and I noticed the improvement, and I really appreciate that. That's another example of a form of criticism where I could have taken it personally. I mean, my initial response was to kind of take it personally. I was like, okay, oh, like, ooh, but it's just deep breath, pause, be the mountain. Okay. She's being the wind right there in that moment. I'm going to be the mountain. I'm going to ground into my inner masculine strength. And I am just going to hold space with what she's saying. And then I'm going to be like, okay, what can I do? And so that kind of that experience was helpful to me. It helped me ground myself in the experience. That's an example right there of recognizing when you can you can say, hey, this is the experience here. I'm going to be present with it, and I'm going to allow myself to acknowledge it, but I'm not going to allow it to control me. And I think that's a really important point when we look at this situation, is that we allow ourselves to be open to the experience. We allow ourselves to be present with the experience. We own and acknowledge the experience, but we don't let it take over us. We don't let it take control. When we're getting criticism, it's very easy to take it personally. I work at a job, for example, during the day where I am dealing with where I'm dealing with customers, and inevitably I will get feedback. Sometimes from those customers, sometimes from my manager. More often than not from my manager, and it's like I can either choose to take that personally, or I can say, "Okay, that is what it is. What can I do to improve?" I always take it as an opportunity to look at what can I do to improve, because the worst that's going to happen is that I'm going to do it and it's not going to change anything. But if I do it and I find that I've improved, then that right there has actually shown me how I can be better at whatever it is that I'm doing. And I think that if you take that kind of approach with criticism, that you can experience a different perspective on criticism, because you start to recognize, like, oh, this is how I can understand and experience this. I don't have to take it personally. I can instead take a step back, breathe into it, be present, and make a different choice. So I recommend doing that. And the next time you have someone being critical of you, just remember, you don't have to take it critically. You can choose to take a step back. You can choose to be the mountain. And that's true regardless of what your gender is, okay? Like that, I mean, I'm talking to, yes, I'm most of my audience here is probably men, but this doesn't have to just apply to men. Like, it can apply to anyone else. Like, you can choose to make that choice, and and step into your sense of masculine power and be aware without letting it take over. And be like, you know what? I can ground into this. I don't have to let this control me. I can choose to step up and be present with myself and aware without having to let it take over and make me feel awkward or take it personally. And I would urge you to not take it personally, because everyone is going to have something that they're going to say to you. The question is, how do you take it? How do you reply to it? You don't have to take it personally. It's just a feeling. And that's really the most important thing to remember. Your feelings do not dictate your reality. This is something I've learned the hard way in my life, because for a long time I would overly identify with my emotions, and I'm learning really to sit with my emotions and kind of be like, yeah, I can hold space with this. I'm feeling this way, and I don't necessarily need to act on it or respond to it. I can just simply be aware of it. That in and of itself can be a really powerful form of expression and experience. All right, thanks for watching, and I hope you all have an excellent rest of your day.